Hello, my name is Stevie Danielzik, and for my research project, I decided to study bog turtles and the impact that heavy rainfall events have on the species. The title of my project is Beyond the Bog: Unraveling the Hydrological Challenges of Above Average Rainfall on the Bog Turtle Presence in Maryland over the Past Decade. So, a little bit of an introduction about why I chose this topic. Number one, I love animals. Number two, I'm a meteorologist at a local TV station in Maryland, and this is where I was born and raised. And I was doing some research and discovered that this specific turtle species is actually declining. So one thing that I found was that bog turtles are the smallest turtle species in North America and one of the smallest on the planet, which I found to be very fascinating. They're commonly found in muddy meadows and open canopy shallow spring-fed wetlands in north central Maryland, specifically in 4 counties. And their wetlands, their habitat is degrading, which is really the reason for their decline. And they're listed as federally threatened and face a very high risk of extinction, according to the Fish and Wildlife Service from 2022. And their active season spans from late spring through early autumn, and that's a very important factor for my presentation because I study their most vulnerable period, which happens to be the time they lay their eggs, their nesting period from late spring to early summer, primarily during the month of June. So there are many factors that threaten the bog turtle species. Number one, urbanization, so development of apartments and grocery stores, that sort. Predators, beavers, I learned to be a very big one. They can really block a lot of the water flow of the stream channels, flooding and potentially drying out the wetlands, which can impact where they lay their eggs and where they deposit them. People are a very big issue as well. They will collect and kill these bog turtles. Not sure why, but they like to do that. So that's why they keep a lot of the bog turtles, the sanctuaries, very disclosed. They don't let the public know where these protected sites are in those certain counties. So human-induced succession or natural fragmentation of their habitat is the main reason for their decline, according to the USDA. But I wanted to study more about how rainfall can impact the bog turtles, so specifically various weather patterns. Particularly rainfall can impact their vegetation growth around wetlands, and that provides the necessary food and shelter for the bog turtles. And according to Maryland DNR, excessive rainfall can promote stream channel incision of the wetlands, which negatively impacts the bog turtle's habitat, reproductive process, and overall survival. So the picture on the left displays an adult bog turtle. So they're very cute. They're very small. They're only about a few inches long in the palm of your hand. They can fit right in the palm of your hand. They're very tiny. And the picture on the right displays their habitat. So this is a look at one of the wetlands in Maryland. These 2 pictures were sent to me by herpetologist Beth Schlimm, and I actually joined her and visited one of their bog turtle sanctuary sites. And it was really cool to be in the element, to see where these bog turtles live, and just to see how fragile the environment is for them. Beth was actually telling me that excessive rainfall in the wetlands can lead to soil saturation and flooding, specifically short-term flooding. So it really impacts where they deposit their eggs, and this occurs mostly in the month of June when they deal with a lot of this short-term flooding. According to Lee et al., a quarter of the worldwide bog turtle population resides in north central Maryland, so specifically in these counties highlighted in this picture. So Carroll, Baltimore, Harford, and Cecil counties. So those are the main areas that I focused on for my project. Over 97% of bog turtle sites are not easily accessible as they occur on private land, private property, making it challenging to study and monitor the hatchlings and the overall population. And so that's why they weren't able to give me exact hatchling data. I found it very hard during my research to obtain a lot of this data. I had to sign a form that I wouldn't disclose any of this information outside of this class. And they don't have a lot of that data to work with because they're pretty much at the mercy of the landowners, if the landowners will let them go and survey the various bog turtle sites that they have on their property. And while there's been a decrease in the overall bog turtle population, NOAA actually states that rainfall and flooding have increased over the past 2 decades in the state. Over the past 5 years, though, or 5 decades, the Eastern Shoreland Conservancy discovered that the frequency of heavy precipitable events has increased along with the total amount of rain falling across the region. Research by DiGadano and Tran from 2022 indicate a noticeably higher magnitude of flooding from rainfall events across the entire mid-Atlantic region due to increased average temperatures. So this is known to escalate the frequency of convective storm systems due to the amount of water vapor in the atmosphere. Localized heavy periods of rainfall from small storm cell clusters occur more frequently during the bog turtle's active season in the summer months, according to Fega et al. From 2012. Excessive rainfall can lead to soil saturation and flooding, like I mentioned before, and Beth Schlimm discovered that this usually happens during the month of June, so during their prime nesting period when they're most vulnerable. Model projections show an increase in intermittent rainfall and evaporation from warmer temperatures in Maryland, specifically during their nesting period, according to the Maryland Department of Natural Resources. And I mentioned that I joined Beth Schlimm and visited one of the bog turtle sites, and she really believes that heavy rainfall will leave a very big negative impact on the wetland habitat. So Maryland continues to experience climatic pattern shifts. Really understanding the relationship between the rainfall trends and the bog turtle populations, the presence and absence, is really essential for conservation efforts in the future. So my goal was to determine if there was a link between increased above average rainfall totals from late spring to early summer and the decline of the bog turtle population specifically in Maryland, no other states, because they're also commonly found across parts of the Northeast as well, and even down towards Virginia. So what is the impact of rainfall patterns on the presence and absence of bog turtles during their June nesting period in north central Maryland? That was one of my research questions. Another question I had was, do the variations in rainfall significantly influence the presence and absence of bog turtles in Maryland from the past 10 years? So all the way back to 2013. So from 2013 to 2023. My hypothesis, anomalies in rainfall, whether above or below normal levels, are anticipated to positively correlate with the likelihood of bog turtle presence. But then deviations in rainfall towards lower than normal levels are expected to correspond with elevated probabilities of bog turtle absence. So some of my methods, since Maryland bog turtle nesting data is unavailable, so those specific numbers that I mentioned, this is a hypothetical analysis on the species, pretty much studied specifically in the month of June. So according to Beyer et al., the bog turtle peak nesting occurs between June 8th through the 22nd of each year. So I decided to use June 1st through the 30th as a proxy to represent a whole year. So from the past 10 years, I used data specifically from the month of June, from the beginning of the month to the end of the month. 10 years of observed rainfall data from one rural and suburban area in each county. So from Carroll, Baltimore, Harford, and Cecil counties. And I obtained that data from the NOAA Regional Climate Center. And I used June monthly rainfall anomaly data. I used the normals, the long-term 30-year average from 1991 through 2020. And that was from the Maryland State Climatologist Office. I obtained that data. So here's what I gathered. These 4 areas that I obtained data from Taneytown, Conowingo Dam, Reisterstown, and also Elkton. That is data that was available. So there were a lot of areas that had missing data. So I chose these specific areas solely because of the data that was available to me from NOAA. So I noticed that Taneytown, so the area in Carroll County, exhibited relatively stable monthly rainfall totals with minimal deviation from the normal value. However, Elkton, the Conowingo Dam in Harford County, and then Reisterstown experienced elevated levels of rainfall, particularly exceeding the average amount of rain during the month of June over the past 10 years. And then so I was kind of at the mercy of using binary data. So because I didn't have those specific bog turtle numbers, for example, 2 bog turtles were found in this area on this year. I had to use binary yes/no data from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources over the past 10 years. And so Beth Schlimm, she sent me the year, the site ID number, the yes/no survey result, and the county. And one thing that was challenging too was that not every area was surveyed each year. So there were a couple years where they didn't even survey bog turtles in Baltimore County. So the data is not very consistent with that. So that could potentially lead to constraints in my data set, which is one of my limitations. But for this, since I had used binary data, I had to do a logistic regression analysis using R software. And this was basically to evaluate the relationship between rainfall anomalies and the presence of bog turtles across those certain areas in these counties across Maryland. The dependent variable was the presence of bog turtles, so the yes/no data, and then the rainfall anomaly for the month of June was the independent variable. So that's why from Baltimore, Cecil, Harford, Carroll counties, the values that I've obtained from the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, the yes/no data is not consistent. So for example, for Baltimore County, I've obtained 17 values from Beth, 35 the most in Carroll County, there were 19 values from Cecil County and 23 from Harford County. So you can see that they were not the same in each. So here's a look at this graph. When I did the logistic regression analysis, here's a look at my results. And this shows the relationship between rainfall anomalies and the probability of bog turtle presence. So the red line, that represents the probability of bog turtle presence, and then the blue dots that you see up here and down here represents where the bog turtles were present or absent across those various rainfall anomalies. And the rainfall anomaly data down here in inches, that is located on the x-axis, the probability of bog turtle presence on the y-axis. So here's what I gathered when I did the logistic regression analysis. The probability of bog turtle presence appears to be relatively high and somewhat consistent across a range of positive rainfall anomalies. So the p-value for the rainfall anomaly coefficient was above the 0.05 level. So this showed that the relationship between rainfall anomalies and the bog turtle presence is not statistically significant. So the presence of bog turtles seems more variable at lower rainfall anomalies, which I found when I did this analysis, with some periods showing high presence and others low. The logistic regression model suggests that higher rainfall anomalies are generally associated with a higher probability of the bog turtle presence. But there are so many other factors that contribute to the decline of the bog turtle species, more so than studying just rainfall. So there are other factors that contribute to their decline. So some of the limitations, this is opportunistic data. So some areas are oversampled and other areas are undersampled. So it was very difficult to obtain and gain access to quantitative data due to the restricted access via private property, and also Maryland DNR does not really want to give out this sacred information in order to protect the bog turtles, which I completely understand. Rainfall data in the study was not collected from exact bog turtle sanctuaries, so the specific sites, so the rainfall data could be a little bit higher or lower. And it's, again, in order to protect the habitats and the species in general. I had some missing data values, so not every county was surveyed each year. There were a couple years where there were no surveys conducted in Baltimore County as well. But despite the limitations, overall this project shows valuable insight into how rainfall could impact the bog turtle habitats. But overall, there needs to be more research conducted. This is just a start. Maybe future research, there could be a longer range of data to work with. I just started out with the past 10 years just to observe the most recent data. And that could potentially help, lead to future research with habitat suitability between rainfall patterns and the short-term flooding of the wetlands. I think it just will help us better understand the relationship between the species and how the rainfall patterns can really impact the population. There is a general trend, though, where positive rainfall anomalies correspond to higher probabilities of bog turtle sightings. But the relationship was not statistically significant, like I mentioned before, so the null hypothesis cannot be rejected. Based on the data collected from the past 10 years, rainfall anomalies in June specifically were not a significant predictor, but rainfall anomalies might influence the presence of bog turtles, but there are other factors that likely play a bigger role in the decline of the population. So it's something that needs to be studied further. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed my presentation.